Hi everybody, TJ Mack of Vintage Cards and Nostalgia here, and in today's video I'm going to show some of my 1968 Topps cards and a couple OPC cards as well. Now for starters, this is the first year that you have a separate OPC and Topps set issued. The 1968 OPC set contained 216 cards and was issued in two series. The Topps set contained 132 cards and was issued in one series. Now one of the things that draws me to this set is the design. The front of both the Topps and the OPC sets have the same design. The Topps set is in an all-horizontal format except for the checklist, while the OPC is in a horizontal format except for the checklist, and then it had two subsets that the Topps set didn't have, one containing all-stars from the previous year as well as the award winners. Now, as I mentioned, I only have a couple OPC cards because I predominantly collect the Topps. How I approach hockey basically is I get the Topps cards unless there isn't a Topps card of a player I want, then I'll get the OPC. I'm not a set builder, I'm just a collector of the key cards and the cards that I connect with. So I just go with the one that I remember most, and when I grew up I collected predominantly Topps because I'm from the United States, though I did have some OPC in my collection because I did live near the Canadian border. But I gravitate more to the Topps for that reason, and plus Topps are typically a little less expensive to buy than the OPC. But again, I'll buy the OPC if I'm looking for a card that isn't in the Topps set. So one of the things that's really neat about this set is you can see the colorful fronts where the player stands out in front, and you have this tinted background of a generic game action shot. And the player's name is shown with the city on the bottom of the card inside these multicolored arrows. And I'm going to turn the backs over, and you're going to see they're a little different. That helps distinguish each issue. Now the Topps has a little lighter, like a pinkish background almost, with blue coloring on the inside, and then of course the white background there with the striping on the top. And then the OPC has more of like a reddish background, and it's got the black there with the white striping on the top as well, and the white background. And the other difference is the OPC will have both the English and the French, where the Topps just has the English on the back. Now, just like with other years in OPC and Topps, there were some different photos used on some of the cards. For example, there's a different photo of Jean Beliveau in the Topps set versus the OPC. Same with the Stan Mikita. You got Terry Sawchuk in the Topps set showing him on the Kings, and then in the OPC he's on the Red Wings. And being OPC was bigger, there of course was some additional players as well. One that I don't have but would like to add, it's a pretty expensive card. It's the #1 card in the OPC set, and that's Hall of Famer Doug Harvey, who played for the St. Louis Blues that year. So just give you a little background on the populations. PSA is graded 16,122 Topps hockey cards for an average of 122 a player. And then there are 765 Bobby Orr cards graded, which is the highest of any player. That's a third-year Bobby Orr card. He's also the most valuable card in the set. Typically sells for around $400 in a PSA 6, and that's what I have, and you'll see it in a few minutes. And then the OPC cards are typically more valuable than the Topps, as I mentioned. There are 20,981 OPC cards graded for an average of 97 per card, because like I said, there's more OPC cards in the set than Topps. Now, there's only 282 Bobby Orrs graded, and that's the most valuable card in the OPC set, and it sells for around an average of $550 to $600 in a PSA 6. Now, compared to the other sports like the 1968 Topps football set, that set averaged about it's a 220 card set, and there are 40,853 graded for an average of 185 a card. And then for baseball, that year, Topps had 598 cards issued, and 354,280 are graded for an average of 592 per player. So the hockey's not rare, but graded examples are certainly not as common as they are in other sports. And another great thing about this set is that it features cards of the 6 expansion teams, and it's the first set to do so. The league expanded starting in 1967 from the original 6 teams to 12 teams, and this set contains the first cards of the Flyers, the Penguins, the Oakland Seals, the North Stars, the Blues, and the Kings. And what the NHL did is they split into 2 divisions, one with the original 6 teams and the other with the expansion teams. So the original 6 teams were in the East, and the expansion teams were in the West. And as you would guess, the East Division dominated the West Division with all the expansion teams. So the Montreal Canadiens won the Stanley Cup that year, and they defeated the St. Louis Blues. So let's take a look at some more cards in the set. Now, in addition to the Henri Richard, I also have these cards here from the Canadiens of Jean Beliveau and Gump Worsley. Now, Worsley shared the goaltending duties that year with Rogie Vachon, who's another Hall of Famer. And Beliveau is one of my favorites from the era. He was just a graceful skater. He had a real strong shot, and he was a true gentleman on and off the ice. These are 2 beautiful examples of those cards. And next year we have the Vezina Trophy winners from that year in Glenn Hall and Jacques Plante. These are 2 absolute legends in goal. If you're not that familiar with hockey, 2 of the greatest certainly of all time to play the position. Plante started primarily with the Canadiens. That's where he started. He played for some other teams as well. And Hall was primarily with the Blackhawks. But both were acquired by the expansion St. Louis Blues. Now, back in those days, the Vezina Trophy was given not just to one goalie, it was given to the best goalie tandem. So they didn't do the individual goalies until the early 80s receiving the Vezina. And that year, both Plante and Hall won it in 1968. And it's really good that they both won it because Hall started 40 games and Plante started 37. So they closely shared the duties. And just 2 of the greats, and they're cards that I just love having because they really are the legends of the game. 2 other outstanding goalies from the era are Johnny Bower, who's known as the China Wall. That was his nickname, a Hall of Fame goalie with the Leafs. And then you have one of the greatest goalies of all time, in my opinion, probably within the top 5, and Terry Sawchuk. And here he is with the LA Kings, one of the expansion teams. And you can see here he's got a polo shirt on under his jersey there. And that's just how he posed, I guess, for the card. And just 2, like I said, just awesome cards to have. Here are 2 of the 3 leading scorers from that year. You have Phil Esposito, who scored 49 goals and finished with 132 points. He was also the Hart Trophy winner that year as league MVP. And then here's Gordie Howe, who was 3rd in scoring that year with 44 goals and 102 points. Now, the next card I'm going to show is the Bobby Hull, and he was 2nd in the league in scoring that year. And one of the great blessings that I have in my collection is my father-in-law's magazine collection. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about a magazine from 1968 and show off my Bobby Hull to go along with it. So here we have a 1968 issue of Sport Magazine with Bobby Hull on the cover. And we're going to take a look inside this magazine. And it's going to talk a little bit about how players viewed Bobby Hull back in the day. Both his opponents, his teammates, and then even the fans. On the inside here, we just have this beautiful red background here on this Bobby Hull picture. I just love the look of this. And then here's his 1968 Topps card as well. And it was in this article that they talked about him scoring his 400th career goal. It was actually against Jerry Cheevers, who was a Hall of Fame goalie with the Boston Bruins. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and I had the card to connect with that event. And one of the things they talked about in the article, they talked to different players around the league. And what was pretty neat is that Boom Boom Jeffrion, and I'll show you one of his cards right here. This is his 1963 Parkhurst. And he was one of the premier scorers of his time. And he had this to say about Bobby Hull. He said that he had the hardest shot ever, harder than his shot, and even Maurice the Rocket Richard. And Jeffrion had this to say about Hull. He said he was a great player, but he doesn't think he's the best player in the league. The player that he actually thought was the best in the league was Stan Mikita. And Stan Mikita was coming off back-to-back MVP seasons in 1966 and 1967. And he also finished 4th in points in 1968. And he was just a great all-around player of that time. Well, one of the coolest things that I read about in the entire article is this. Eddie Giacomin, who's shown here in his 1972 Topps card, was actually held out of games against the Blackhawks in 1967 because he would freeze up against Hull's powerful slap shot. And Giacomin, he didn't deny it. He said, "What can I tell you? He's definitely the toughest shot in the league. He gets you backing up because you want the last split second to stop the puck. I find myself pulling up, and he blasts one underneath my pads. I haven't played the last few games against him because I don't want to fall into bad habits." And Bobby Hull, he was just one of those showmen that brought fans to their feet, and he was just one of the greats of the game of that time. And even Jeffrion said that. He was just such a spectacular showman of the day, and certainly one of my favorite players to collect. And that's, again, just what I love about the magazines is you get these insights. Here's a closer-up view of some of the cards I showed there. There's the Boom Boom Jeffrion and the Eddie Giacomin. Two beautiful-looking cards. Then you have the Bobby Hull and the Jerry Cheevers. There's Stan Mikita. Here are the two absolute legends of the game and the most valuable cards in the top set. This is the third-year card of Bobby Orr. Orr led all defensemen in scoring with 64 points and earned his second of 8 straight Norris trophies as the best defenseman. And then it was really starting the next season in 1969 that he had his first of 6 straight 100-point seasons and rewrote the record books for defensemen and forever changed the position to one that was offensive-minded. And then here is the Flyers goalie Bernie Parent's rookie card. Parent won 2 Vezina trophies, 2 Stanley Cups, and then he held the record for most wins in a season with 47 until it was broken in 2006 by Martin Brodeur. And at one time, he also held second best with 43 wins in a season. Just one of the great all-time goalies to ever play the game, and certainly one of the best of the 1970s. There's Tim Horton and Dave Keon, two of the great Maple Leafs of the day. And Keon's probably one of the most popular Maple Leafs in all of NHL history in the existence of the franchise. And then Tim Horton's well known around the parts where I live for his chain of donut shops and coffee. These two players were traded for one another going into the season. You got Frank Mahovlich, Hall of Famer. He was traded from the Maple Leafs to the Red Wings, and then Norm Allman, who's also a Hall of Famer, was traded from the Red Wings to the Maple Leafs. So you can still see them in their former teams' uniforms, but with the logos of the teams that they ended up going to. Last card I'm going to show today is Pierre Palat, and in between Doug Harvey and Bobby Orr, Palat was probably the best defenseman in hockey. He won 3 straight Norris trophies as best defenseman from 1963 to 1965. He was known primarily with the Chicago Blackhawks. You can see here he's got a Blackhawks jersey on, but he was on the Maple Leafs at the time this card was issued. And this is his last playing days card. And what's really cool is I did a profile of Palat sometime last year, and his great nephew, Carter Palat, commented on my video, which I just thought was really neat that he actually watched it, and he had a lot of nice things to say about his great uncle. So that's all I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this view of the 1968 Topps with a couple of peachy sprinkled in. You have a great weekend, and we'll talk again soon.